morning and keep plugging and have some discipline and keep learning. And it's amazing how it works out okay. I don't think it's wise to have an ambition to be president of the United States or a billionaire or something like that, because the odds are too much against you. Much better to aim low. I did not intend to get rich. I wanted to get independent. I just overshot. And and by the way, while you're clapping, some of the overshooting was accidental. There's a big, you can be very deserving and very intelligent and very disciplined, but there's also a factor of luck that comes into this thing. And the people who get the outcomes that seem extraordinary, they're the people who have discipline and intelligence and good virtue, plus a hell of a lot of luck. One of my favorite tricks is the inversion process. And I'll give you an example. When I was a meteorologist in World War II, they told me how to draw weather maps and predict the weather. But what I was actually doing is clearing pilots to take flights. And I just reversed the problem. I inverted. I said, suppose I wanted to kill a lot of pilots. What would be the easy way to do it? And I soon concluded that the only easy way to do it would be to get the planes into icing the planes couldn't handle, or to get the pilot to a place where he'd run out of fuel before he could safely land. So I made up my mind I was going to stay miles away from killing pilots by either icing or getting them into sucked-in conditions when they couldn't land. I think that helped me be a better meteorologist in World War II. I just reversed the problem. And so I always knew from the very first, when I was a little boy, that the opportunities that were important that were going to come to me were few, and that the trick was to prepare myself for seizing the few that came. This is not the attitude they have at a big investment counseling thing. They think if they study a million things, they can know a million things. And of course, the result is almost nobody can outperform an index. Whereas I sit here with my Daily Journal stock, my Berkshire Hathaway stock, my holdings in Lilu's Asian fund, my Costco stock, and of course I'm outperforming everybody. And I'm 95 years old, and I practically never have a transaction. And the answer is I'm right and they're wrong. And that's why it's worked for me and not for them. And now the question is, do you want to be more like me or more like them? The idea of diversification makes sense to a point. If you don't know what you're doing and you want the standard result and not be embarrassed, well, of course you can widely diversify. Now, nobody's entitled to a lot of money for recognizing that, because it's a truism. It's like knowing that 2 and 2 equals 4. But the investment professionals think they're helping you by arranging a diversification. An idiot could diversify a portfolio, or a computer for that matter. But the whole trick of the game is to have a few times when you know that something is better than average, and invest only where you have that extra knowledge. And then if you get just a few opportunities, that's enough. And what the hell does you care? You own 3 securities and J.P. Morgan Chase owns 100. You know, what's wrong with owning a few securities? Warren always says if you lived in a growing town and you owned stock in 3 of the best enterprises in the town, isn't that diversified enough? The answer is, of course it is. They're all wonderful places. And that Fortune's formula, which got so famous, which was a formula to tell people how much to bet on each transaction if you had an edge. And of course, the bigger your edge, the more close the transaction was to a certain winner, the more you should bet. And of course, there's mathematics behind it. But of course it's true. It's perfectly possible to buy only one thing because the opportunity is so great and such a cinch, or only two or three. So the whole idea of diversification when you're looking for excellence is totally ridiculous. It doesn't work. It gives you an impossible task. What fun is it to do an impossible task over and over again? I find it agony. Who would want to do it? And I don't see why. My father had a client. He was a lawyer in Omaha. He had a client whose husband had a little soap company. And the guy died, and my father sold the soap company. This woman was one of the richest people in town in the middle of the Depression. And what she had was a little soap company in a big mansion in Omaha's best neighborhood. And they sold the soap company. She had a mansion in the best neighborhood and $300,000. But $300,000 in 1930-something was an incredible amount of money. A little hamburger was a nickel, a big hamburger was a dime, and the all-you-can-eat cafe in Omaha would feed you all you needed to stay alive for 2 bits a day. I mean, $300,000. Well, she didn't hire an investment counselor. She didn't do anything. She's a wonderful old woman. And she just took that and she divided it into 5 chunks. And she bought 5 stocks. I remember 3 of them because I probated her estate. And it was, one of them was General Electric, one was Dow, one was DuPont, and I forget the other 2. And then she never changed those stocks. She never paid any advisor. She never did anything. And she bought some municipal bonds. She never spent her income. And she bought some municipal bonds from time to time with the income. By the time she died in the 50s, she had $1.5 million. No costs, no expenses. And I said, how did you decide to do that? And she said, well, she said, I thought electricity and chemistry were the coming things. She just chunked it all in and sat on her ass. I always liked that old woman. My kind of a girl. But it's rare. You know, but if you stop to think about it, think of all the expense and palaver that she didn't have to listen to, and all the trouble she avoided, and 0 costs. And of course, what people don't realize, because they're so mathematically illiterate, is if you make 5% and pay 2 of it to your advisors, you're not losing 40% of your future. You're losing 90%. Because over a long period of time, that little difference causes a 90% disadvantage to you. So it's hugely important for somebody who's a long-term holder not to be paying a big annual toll out of the performance. And of course, there are a few big-time advisors now who are using indexation very heavily. And of course, they're prospering mightily. And of course, every time they get somebody, it's just agony for the rest of the investment counseling business. It pains me that in my own country, I see people that were once regarded as very reputable people helping these things exist, promoting their use, and so forth. This is a very, very bad thing. The country did not need a currency that's good for kidnappers and so on.
What do you think happened? Because there are a lot of big names, a lot of people and firms that you might not have anticipated.
That's what impresses me. There are people who think they just got to be on every deal that's hot. And they don't care whether it's child prostitution or Bitcoin. If it's hot, they want to be in it. I think that's totally crazy. Reputation is very helpful in financial life. And to destroy your reputation by associating with scumballs and their scumball promotions is a huge mistake.
Do you think those companies did any due diligence, or what happened?
I think they actually mean well, though that you're seeing a lot of delusion. It's partly fraud and partly delusion. That's a bad combination. I don't like either fraud or delusion. And the delusion may be more extreme than the fraud.
Delusion, how so?
Nobody's going to invent a new thing that every 12-year-old kid can be a billionaire or something. He just calls it Munger coin. He starts trading it or something. It's crazy. It's demented. Once you've got a good idea, it's much easier to push that to wretched excess. That's why good ideas carried to wretched excess become bad ideas. And once you got that concept in your mind, of course, it's always going to be some good idea. Nobody's going to say, I've got some that I want to sell you. The blockchain. It's high octane blockchain. But blockchain is a new good thing that's come up, like fairy dust.
You do have a way of putting it very precisely, Charlie.
I don't think there are good arguments against my position. I think the people that oppose my position are idiots. And so I don't think there is a rational argument against my position. This is an incredible thing. Naturally, people like to run gambling casinos where other people lose. And the people who invented this crypto crapo, which is my name for it, and sometimes I call it crypto crapo, and sometimes I call it, well, crypto shit. And it's just ridiculous that anybody would buy this stuff. And it isn't. You can think of hardly nothing on earth that has done more good to the human race than currency, national currencies. They were absolutely required to turn man from a goddamn successful ape into modern successful humans in human civilization. It enabled all these convenient exchanges. So if somebody says, I'm going to create something that sort of replaces the national currency, it's like saying I'm going to replace the national air. You know, it's asinine. It isn't even slightly stupid. It's massively stupid. And of course, it's very dangerous. And of course, the governments were totally wrong to permit it. And of course, I'm not proud of my country for allowing this crap, what I call the crypto it's worthless, it's no good, it's crazy. It'll do nothing but harm. It's antisocial to allow it. And the guy who made the correct decision on this is the Chinese leader. The Chinese leader took one look at crypto and he says, not in my China. And boom, there isn't any crypto in China. He's right and we're wrong. If you take the modern world, where people are trying to teach you how to come in and trade actively in stocks. Well, I regard that as roughly equivalent to trying to induce a bunch of young people to start off on heroin. It is really stupid. And when you're already rich, to make your money by encouraging people to get rich by trading. And then there are people on the TV, another wonderful place. And they say, I have this book that will teach you how to make 300% a year. And all you have to do is pay for shipping, and I will mail it to you. How likely is it that a person who had suddenly found a way to make 300% a year would be trying to sell books on the internet to you? And it's ridiculous. And yet, I've described modern commerce. And the people that do this all day think they're useful citizens. The advertising agents that invent the lingo. So in insurance, they say, the two people who shifted from Geico to the Glotz Insurance Company saved $400 each. What they don't tell you is there are only two such people in the whole United States, and they were both nuts. But they mislead you on purpose. And I get tired of it. And I don't think it's right that we deliberately mislead people as much as we do. Let me tell you another story that I think is an interesting one about the modern life. But this goes back to a different time. And this man has this wonderful horse. And it's just a marvelous horse. It's got an easy gait and good looking and everything. It just works wonderfully. But also occasionally just gets so he's dangerous and vicious and causes enormous damage and trouble and breaks arms and legs for his rider and so on. And he goes to the vet and says, what can I do about this horse? And the vet says, that's a very easy problem and I'm glad to help you. He says, what should I do? And the man says, the next time your horse is behaving well, sell it. Well, think of how immoral that is. And haven't I just described what private equity has to do? When private equity has to sell something that's really troublesome, they hire an investment banker. And what does the investment banker do? He makes a projection. You can't, I have never seen such expertise in my whole life as is created in making projections in investment banking. There is no business so lousy it can't get a wonderful projection. But is that a great way to make a living, to have phony projections and use it to make money out of people you look right into the eyes of? I would say no. And by and large, Warren and I, we never tried to make money out of stupidity of our dumb buyers. We tried to make money by buying. And if we were selling horse shit, we didn't want to pretend it was a cure for arthritis. And I think it's better to go through life our way instead of theirs.
How worried are you by the declines in the share price of Berkshire Hathaway, the difficulties the company's in? No?
This is the third time that Warren and I have seen our holdings in Berkshire go down top tick to bottom tick by 50%. I think it's in the nature of long-term shareholding with the normal vicissitudes in worldly outcomes and in markets that the long-term holder has his quoted value of his stock go down and then by, say, 50%. In fact, you can argue that if you're not willing to react with equanimity to a market price decline of 50% 2 or 3 times a century, you're not fit to be a common shareholder and you deserve the mediocre result you're going to get.